What is going on, chess YouTube? In today's video, I want to show you a crazy game played between the Indian superstars Arjun Erigaisi and Gukesh D at the 2024 Warsaw Rapid Blitz Tournament. And here we go. In the game, Arjun Erigaisi is playing as white. He opens 1c4, the English opening, and how does Gukesh respond? Well, he goes for the main line as black. That is 1e5, and we have the King's English on the board. Now here Arjun, knight to c3, very standard. And now the main line for black is, of course, knight to f6. But instead, Gukesh puts pressure on that knight immediately with the very active move bishop b4, threatening bishop takes c3 and doubling white's pawn structure on the queen side. Now here Arjun Erigaisi, he's having none of that. He goes knight d5, jumping in with the knight and putting pressure on that bishop on b4. Now, how does Gukesh respond? Of course, knight takes b4 is the threat, and with that in mind, the three main moves here for black are a5, defending the bishop, or bishop c5, or bishop e7, retreating the bishop. Now in the game, Gukesh does go e5. That is one of the strongest lines here for black, believe it or not. And yes, white can win the bishop pair immediately with the move knight takes b4. However, after a takes b4, Gukesh is doing just fine. His kingside is a little more developed. He is ready to go knight f6 and short castles. And beyond that, he does have the open a file for the rook on a8 and that double pawn on b4. It's actually more of an asset than a weakness. So overall, Gukesh would be doing just fine. So with that in mind here, Arjun Erigaisi, he just goes knight f3, developing the knight, but the drawback of this move is black has the option of going e4, hitting the knight on f3 in the spirit of the Alekhines opening. Now, in this game, Gukesh does not go e4. That is a very playable move, putting pressure on the knight, but instead he just goes d6, bolstering his pawn on the e5 square. Now, Arjun Erigaisi, he has many different ideas here. For example, the strongest line, according to the engine, is a3, knocking back the bishop, and after bishop c5, then you go e3, threatening d4, and you do have a very good dark square blockade with your pawns against that dark squared bishop. Now, instead, in the game, Arjun, being a very original, creative attacking player, he finds a unique idea in this position. He does go g3 in the spirit of the Catalan opening, intending bishop g2 and short castles, and yes, this is very common in the English opening in general, but not in this line of the English. Now, here, Gukesh, c6 is the move, driving back the knight. Of course, knight takes b4 is the main move here, and that is what Arjun plays. So, knight takes b4, then a takes b4, and now Arjun, I expected to say bishop g2 and short castles here for white. That looks like the most logical plan for white, but instead here, he plays the very active move d4, expanding in the center. And now, yes, this move is very active and it is very thematic for the English. However, here, it's not exactly the best idea. Now, of course, Arjun is threatening to win that pawn on e5. For example, d takes, queen takes, king takes, and then knight takes e5 would be excellent for white. With that in mind, Gukesh must respond. And the two main ways to respond are e takes d4 and e4. Now, taking on d4 is not a particularly good idea. After queen takes d4, white gets basically everything he wants in this position. His queen is very well centralized. It can't be attacked as black's pawn is on c6. That stops knight to c6 ideas. And beyond that, white has very harmonious development. However, Gukesh here, he doesn't take on d4. Instead, he plays the much stronger move. That is finally the move e4, knocking back that knight on f3. Now the knight must move. In the game, it does go knight to d2. Knight g5 was technically playable, but then after d5, black would be doing excellent. So instead, knight d2 on the board for Arjun, and now we have knight to f6. And now the problem with this pawn structure is white's bishop on g2 will be biting on granite with these black pawns on e4 and soon to be d5. That bishop on g2 will just have no activity despite being a so-called good bishop. Yes, black's pawns are on light squares, but he would have nothing to attack, and for that reason, that bishop will be in jail for a very long time. Now in the game, Arjun here does just go bishop g2, however, there were plenty of other ideas. For example, f3, queen to b3, a3, and so on were also quite playable. Now here, bishop g2 was played in the game, and Gukesh does strike in the center with the move d5, restricting that light square bishop on g2, and of course, defending the pawn on e4. It was being attacked by the knight and the bishop, therefore d5 was virtually forced. Now here, Arjun, in this position, he's got to find a way to get counterplay fast. Now, the strongest move here is just queen to b3, putting pressure on that pawn on b4, and surprisingly, it's not so easy to defend. Yes, black can go queen e7 or knight a6, however, those moves are not exactly what black wants to play in this position. Now, instead here, Arjun does just go for the move b3, intending perhaps bishop b2. However, overall, this move is very, very slow. And if he does go for the double fianchetto setup with those two b's on b2 and g2, I mean, that would be extremely passive. Both bishops would be in jail, essentially. And Gukesh, I mean, he would have a free hand to attack on the king side, perhaps with the alpha 0 attack, h5, h4, and so on. Now here, Gukesh, he just castles, and short castles is the move, a very solid move. And now here, Arjun, e3, again, blocking in his dark squared bishop. I'm not so sure about this. Things are already getting very dicey for the new member of the 2800 ELO club. All right, Gukesh, in this position, he's got to get his pieces developed. That means the rook and the bishop. For example, he can go rook e8 or bishop f5 or e6. In the game, Gukesh does go bishop f5, a perfectly fine move, perhaps intending queen d7 and bishop h3. That would be a very good start to his attack on the king side. Now, Arjun, he does go bishop b2. He is heading for that double fianchetto setup, but again, both b's on g2 and b2 are quite passive here. All right, Gukesh, rook e8, then castles, then knight b7. Gukesh getting all of his pieces onto very good squares. And now Arjun tries to get something going on the queen side. He plays the move a3, expanding. But now after b takes and bishop takes, here Gukesh just goes knight to f8, getting his knight off that d7 square. And now, once again, he is ready for, say, queen d7 and then bishop h3, trading off light squared bishops. And from there, maybe knight g4, h5, h4, and so on. I mean, his attack just plays itself from this position. All right, now, in this position, Arjun Erigaisi, believe it or not, the best move for him is going to be bishop takes f8, trading off one of his two bishops. Yes, he will lose the bishop pair. However, this bishop, it's just not doing a whole lot. He needs to get rid of it, and he also needs to get some sort of activity going on the open A file. So overall, bishop takes f8 would be the best move here for Arjun, and if he played that, he would have a slightly worse position, but overall, it wouldn't be that bad. Now, instead, he does expand on the queen side with move b4. Very active, but this move is quite problematic. Here, Gukesh, he just goes queen d7. Again, the attack playing itself. The plan now is just bishop h3, maybe h5, h4, and if bishop takes, queen takes, and then knight to g4. Again, all of the pieces will pile up very fast on the king side, and it's actually quite hard for white to get his pieces over there. I mean, this pawn structure here just blocks out a lot of his pieces. All right, now, Arjun, he does proceed queen to b3, but this move has one big mistake. He really had to go b5 immediately, because now Gukesh can go b5 himself, blocking down the queen side, and again, that bishop on a3 would be in permanent jail. Instead here, Gukesh does go bishop h3. This is a blitz game. He's blitzing out moves, perfectly fine. And now Arjun corrects his mistake. He does go b5, stopping the b5 advance from Gukesh, gaining space, and threatening to open up lines on the queen side. Now we have knight g6, getting his other knight into the game. Now, believe it or not, the knight may want to go to h4 or f4 in the future, even if that means sacrificing a piece, especially if it gets in, say, bishop takes, queen takes, then knight to g4 first. That could be deadly. All right, rook fc1 for Arjun, then bishop takes, king takes, and sure enough, queen g4, flying in with the queen. Now the threats do include, for example, knight h4 and so on, as that pawn on g3 is currently pinned to the king on g2. So with that in mind here, Arjun, he is feeling the heat, he's feeling the pressure, and he does just go king to h1, getting his king off that g-file, and that pawn off the pin on g3 being pinned to the king on g1. Now, real fast, the computer does not like this move at all. Instead of king to h1, the computer here actually likes the idea of h3. However, even this is quite problematic. For example, Gukesh could just go knight to h4, driving back the king, then going queen takes h3, winning a pawn. And believe it or not, Stockfish says that is the better of the two evils. Now, instead, king to h1 played in the game. Again, this being a critical mistake. And here, Gukesh, he just flies in with the queen to e2, threatening both queen takes d2 and queen takes f2. How is Arjun going to defend? Well, he starts with the very creative move, rook to a2, defending along the second rank, and now he has all kinds of discovered attacks on the queen. For example, if Gukesh does go queen takes f2, then knight takes e4, hits the queen with the discovered attack by the rook. He could follow up, say, knight takes f6, trading off a pair of knights, damaging black's pawn structure. That would be all she wrote for Gukesh D's attack in this game. So with that in mind here, Gukesh, he doesn't take on f2. Instead, knight to g4 is the move, as promised, jumping in with the knight, threatening knight takes f2, winning the pawn with check. Now here, Arjun, the move is knight to f1, retreating the knight and defending along the second rank with the queen. Of course, now the queen is under attack, but Gukesh ignores it for now, and he goes knight takes f2, winning the free pawn. The king moves, and then knight to h3, jumping back with the knight, and of course the queen will have time to go to, say, f3 or g4. It is not under any real danger here. All right, king h1 is the move, then queen to f3, hits the king once again, then rook g2, blocks the check, the rook showing the power of the rook lift on the second rank, swinging over to the king side. Now here, in this position, Gukesh D has an absolutely brilliant sequence of moves that basically decides the game on the spot. If you like puzzles, pause the video right here and try to find the beautiful, brilliant sacrifice for Gukesh in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this one. All right, here, the key idea for Gukesh, believe it or not, is the move knight g to f4, an absolutely mind-blowing knight sacrifice. Here's the idea. First of all, black is threatening queen takes g2. That would win the game on the spot. If you defend with, say, I don't know, queen to c2 and so on, you can win the exchange, winning the rook for the knight. That would be devastating. Now, real fast, after knight g to f4, you can't take with the d-pawn because then the queen on b3 does hang. Instead, if you take with the g-pawn, g takes f4, then you bring the other knight to f4, once again threatening queen takes g2, and if you try to defend with, say, the queen, I don't know, queen to c2, then you can trade on g2, and eventually the bishop on a3 will hang as well. So overall, knight g to f4 is a mind-blowing move. That one does deserve 2 exclamation points, but instead in the game, Gukesh, he plays a much simpler option. D takes c4, nothing wrong with that at all, just not as strong. Now here, of course, the queen has to move. If you take that pawn with the queen or the rook, you are losing on the spot. If you take with the queen, then rook takes a3, wins the undefended bishop, and instead if you go rook takes c4, then queen takes f1, and then rook g1, queen takes g1 will be checkmate. That knight on g1 would be undefended. So of course, taking on c4 is simply not an option. Instead, queen to c3 was the move played in the game. Now here, Gukesh, the strongest move is going to be knight to f2. The complications are crazy after that move, but instead here the move is simply c takes b5, winning yet another free pawn. And here Gukesh is literally up 3 pawns in this position. Can Arjun possibly defend from here? Let's find out. It is a blitz game after all. All right, knight to d2 hits the queen, then queen to g4 retreats, then bishop b2. Arjun trying to untangle, but Gukesh, knight g5, jumping back with the knight, defending e4, threatening ideas like knight to f3. He is not slowing down. All right, rook f1, piling up pressure on the f-file, but then f6, a very simple defensive move in the spirit of the great grandmaster Ben Feingold. He's quite the big fan of this move f6 in any position, especially as black. Now here, queen to b4 develops the queen, and then queen d7 retreats the queen. Gukesh just playing safe and solid, defending b5. Of course, he is up 3 pawns. All he has to do here is just defend and hang on, and it's going to be almost impossible for Arjun to break through, but maybe he will. He is quite the attacking player. All right, bishop c3, then knight to e7, rerouting the knight, potentially wanting to go knight d5, hitting both the queen and the bishop on c3. Now we have queen b2 getting out of the attack, knight d5, rook e2, and now a brilliant move by Gukesh in this position. Again, if you like puzzles, pause the video and try to find a shocker move right here. Of course, the move is rook to a2, flying down with the rook. The point being, if you take the rook, then knight takes c3, wins the bishop, then the rook on e2. There is no way to defend the rook and move the queen. Therefore, you would lose material on the spot. All right, instead of that, queen to c1 is the move, jumping back. But now, of course, that rook on a2 is extremely active. That was the benefit of that move. And now here, Gukesh, he jumps in with the knight, knight to f3. And of course, you cannot take the knight, as then the rook on e2 would hang, as it is hanging as well. All right, now, rook f to f2, Arjun trying to defend. Then knight takes d2, bishop takes, and here the move is c3, pushing that pawn down the board. That pawn is now a serious asset in this game. All right, here Arjun, he takes on c3, bishop takes, but of course Gukesh, he is not done. Rook takes, and then rook to c8, pins the bishop on c3 to the queen. This is getting ugly. All right, rook c2 tries to defend, but then queen to c6, piling up. If the bishop moves, then queen takes c2, wins the rook, as the queen is defended by the rook on c8. And if you do nothing, knight takes c3, and then b4 defends the pawn. There is no way to win that knight. How can Arjun possibly defend? Well, he tries queen to a1, the idea being if you take the bishop on c3, technically the knight would be pinned to the queen. Maybe there's something there, but here Gukesh, he shuts it down immediately. He just plays the very simple move b4, hitting the bishop. If the bishop moves, then the rook on c2 hangs. Therefore, the bishop is pinned. You are losing the bishop and the game. And for that reason here, Arjun Erigaisi, he resigns on the spot to Gukesh D. He is just unstoppable in this game. Wow, what a game between Arjun and Gukesh from the 2024 Warsaw Rapid and Blitz Tournament. All right, Chess YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that like button. And check out this video right here, where I show you one of the absolute craziest games that Gukesh and Arjun Erigaisi have ever played. It is an insane attacking game in the English attack of the Tailwind Sicilian. That game was just wild. If you haven't seen it, check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.